Good morning and welcome again. This is a wonderful topic. Can man see God? And of course, it's interesting that they start off with the statement from John that no man hath seen God. And then follows the only begotten in the bosom of the Father declares him. And so we're left with this mystery. It's like, wait, what does that mean? No man can see God, and yet at the same time, all of the scriptures and all of the saints say, as was read, that God can be seen or perhaps experienced. And so even though the scripture of the Bhagavad Gita says the same thing, thou cannot see me with mortal eyes, but behold my sight divine. So what is this sight divine? How do we receive the intuitive perception of the soul? How do we go from our human consciousness to the consciousness of God realization, to the consciousness described in this beautiful chapter of the autobiography, an experience in cosmic consciousness? How do we get there? And the good thing for us is that we have a roadmap. Not only do we need to look at this story that Yvonne read about the idea of oceanic joy breaking upon the shores of our soul, and then kind of go, okay, oceanic joy, my joy. Oceanic joy, my joy. We don't have to compare like that. We just have to go, whatever joy we perceive is a good and wonderful thing. And if we grab a hold of the joy of God, then we eventually will be able to experience the idea of oceanic joy. In fact, it won't even just be an idea, it will be a real experience. And so whether our joy is very fleeting, it's there in a moment and as soon as we notice it, it's gone again, or whether we have very deep meditations of our own, where joy permeates our entire being, every atom of our being resonating with the inner joy of God, is immaterial so long as we attempt to experience the divine. In other words, we have to put out the effort, but it's our birthright, because the whole creation of the entire cosmos is filled with the vibration of ever new, inexhaustible joy and bliss of God. At our deepest reality, that is who and what we are. All we need to do is remember a little bit more of that true reality. So whatever joy you perceive, take it, grab a hold of it, bring it into your being as deeply as possible, and try to experience the touch of God behind that touch of joy, because that's who we really are. In this aspect of the oceanic joy of God that Yogananda experiences, there's another part of that story in the chapter. And it's really interesting because he has this experience and then he comes out of it. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because before he's given the experience, he actually leaves his guru's ashram. It's like most of us devotees, I'm not getting what I want here, so I'm going to seek elsewhere. And so he goes and he seeks in the Himalayas. And he has a few adventures and some wonderful experiences. But eventually, he comes back to his guru, to Sri Yukteswar. And he's a little shamefaced about leaving the ashram, especially when Sri Yukteswar pretty much said, it's not a good idea. He goes anyway. And hey, have we ever been there? Have we ever done anything that's really not a good idea? Maybe not. You guys are lucky if you haven't. But some of us have. And then we have to come back shamefacedly and go, all right, God, all right, Guru, now what do I do? And Sri Yukteswar gently welcomes him back into the fold and just loves him, unconditional love, because he knows that the rhythm of the devotee is to go towards God and then maybe get distracted by something and backtrack perhaps. But eventually the devotee, the longing in our heart for God, awakens again, and we try again, and we try again. So anyway, Yogananda comes back to the ashram and he goes to meditate. And he sits to meditate and his thoughts are unruly. I don't know if that happens to you all, but his thoughts were unruly, as if birds scattering before the hunter. You know, have you ever taken a walk by the river and you've come across a bush and they startle the birds out of the bush and they all go every direction? Well, those were Yogananda's thoughts in this meditation. And Yukteswar calls to him Mukunda, which was his name as a child. Mukunda. And Yogananda ignores him because I'm trying to meditate. You know, he's thinking to himself, leave me alone, I'm trying to meditate. And he calls again, Mukunda. The third time there was a small rebuke in the voice. And so Yogananda answered, Sir, can't you see I'm trying to meditate? And Yukteswar smiles at him and says, I know how you are meditating. Your thoughts are like leaves caught up in a whirlwind. Please come here, Mukunda. And of course he does, and he bows at the feet of his guru. And this guru rises him up and looks at him deeply, and he says, I am going to fulfill your heart's desire. Yogananda was a little unsure what this meant because Yukteswar wasn't prone to speaking in riddles of any kind. But he was curious, and so he says, all right, Guru. And Sri Yukteswar taps him gently over the heart. And with that little tap, the breath flows out of Yogananda's body. He becomes rooted to the ground, immobile, and thus begins his experience of cosmic consciousness, transmitted by the grace of God and his guru. And he goes into this amazing experience of samadhi, of knowing the Imperium within his own heart as the intuitive perception of the entire cosmos that God has created. And then he comes out of it. And when he comes out of it, several very interesting things happen. First of all, he experiences his breath rushing back into his body. And then he feels his consciousness shrinking back into the human form. And he described it as an unbearable disappointment to go from cosmic consciousness back into the consciousness of this little human body. Unbearable disappointment. Now, for most of us, that level of disappointment, because we probably haven't had cosmic consciousness, is a little hard to fathom. But how many of us have had experiences of intense joy, upliftment, experience expansion? And then lo and behold, we go back into the little human limitations and our own little squabbles within ourselves and our pains of our body and our distracting thoughts, etc. And we too feel a little bit of that unbearable disappointment. Now another thing happened that was interesting. Yukteswar looked at him because he saw the disappointment that Yogananda felt at having the experience disappear. And he says, oh, it's not good to get overdrunk on ecstasy. Come, let us sweep the porch and take a walk by the river. It's like, what do you make of that? Cosmic consciousness, sweep the porch. And Yogananda was tuning into his guru. And it's about balanced living. It's about the idea that not only do we want to receive the deepest levels of consciousness in our meditations, but then we want, like the masters do themselves, to have that experience in our mundane life. Sweeping the floor, feeding the children, driving to and from work, whatever it is, to experience the joy of God even then. And so Yogananda dutifully sweeps the floor and they go for a walk. And for several months after this experience, Yogananda practices trying to go into cosmic consciousness with Yukteswar's tutelage. And so he learns how to, at will, draw the cosmic consciousness to himself, at will. And then he goes farther. And he learns how to transmit that experience of God to others, to other willing, open devotees, those devotees who have tried to open their intuitive perception through their service and devotion to God, through the depth of their meditation. He learned how to transmit it. And that's excellent news for any devotee. Because remember, we're talking about and the Son of God who is in the bosom of the Father declares God. Well, that's a transmission of the presence of God. Sri Yukteswar tapped Yogananda on the heart and declared God. Yogananda found out how to go deep into meditation to the point that he could then transmit that experience of God to the devotees who attune themselves to him. Now, this attunement is the process of the devotee to be able to receive the deeper teachings within our own being, to understand the deeper realities beyond our human consciousness to the consciousness of God within. And the other part that the attunement with the Guru offers to us is the power to know God. The power to know God is ours through attunement to a God-realized master. And so what do we have to do to receive that power and to learn how to dive into cosmic consciousness ourselves? Again, it's not about the oceanic joy of God versus our little teacup of God. It's about learning how to expand our little teacup into something bigger and bigger so we can hold more joy, so we can resonate with that and more. Now, interestingly enough, after he learned to transmit the power of knowing God, he went to his guru and he said, I have a problem I want you to help me with. And Sri Yukteswar, well, sure. He says, Sir, when will I find God? And Yukteswar smiles at him and he says, well, you've found God already. And Yogananda says, oh, no, sir, I haven't. And Yukteswar smiles and tells him, he says, well, that ever new joy that resonates to the atomic level of your own being, that is God. Inexhaustible bliss, that is God. If you're looking for a venerable personage, or if you're looking for miraculous powers, look elsewhere. Experience the depth of joy within your own being, and you have found God. And Yogananda goes, oh. And Yukteswar goes on to say, when you experience that joy throughout the day, not just in your meditations, but throughout the day, use that joy as a source of inspiration to intuitively guide you to whatever is right in every moment, in every decision. That perception, that intuitive perception that allows us to connect with God as joy, also guides us in understanding how to maneuver through our daily life in the presence of God. So it's not so, there's no dichotomy. It's not like, okay, wonderful experience in meditation, and then nothing else throughout the day. Total chaos. Well, if we have total chaos throughout the day, try to bring that joy back into it. Whenever you feel total chaos, find the joy in the total chaos and see what happens from there. Your thoughts are scattered to the wind, enjoy the wind. But in the moment, this is why contentment is so important, because in every single moment, look for the goodness of God behind it, regardless of what the experience is. Find that resource of joy bubbling up no matter what your inner or outer experience might be. Search for it and find it and hold on to it. Now, when we are as devotees, we don't always have that depth of experience. And there's this tendency of devotees to think that maybe the tool isn't working. And there's this beautiful story of a couple of devotees who were initiated into a very sacred form of meditation. And the first devotee works with the technique for a while and perceives a certain amount of increased joy in his being. And then it sort of levels out. And, he tries and keeps trying, but it levels out. So he starts to think to himself, well, I've gotten everything I can from this technique. That's all there is with this technique, so I better go get a new technique. So he goes to his guru and he says, Guru, I'd like to be initiated into the next level. And the guru looks at him and he smiles and he says to another disciple, come on over here for a second, would you? Because these had both been initiated at the same time. And he asked the second disciple, would you like to receive the next technique? And the second disciple looks at the guru in horror, just abject horror, and says, oh, no, please not, sir. I have so much joy now that I cannot do my work. I go to my office and I deliver the mail, and my bosses are so angry at me because I just get lost in bliss and I can't even function. I do not want another technique. I can't embrace the level of joy that I already have. What a problem to have, huh? Wouldn't that be wonderful, to be caught up in so much bliss? But the first devotee, the interesting part of this, he hears this story of the second one, and he gets it. It's not about the tool. Because this other devotee is going deep in God and the joy of God. He goes, it's about offering myself more completely. It's about giving in service and devotion to God. It is about trying to draw the presence of joy within myself. In other words, to think not so much about what I can get from God, but what can I give to God? Because God gives to us in the same level and quality that we give to God. And that's a wonderful way to remember, to just simply tune into the presence of God whenever you can. Do your best. If your meditations seem dry, shake it up a bit. Try to add more service, more devotion. Do whatever you can to get the love of God happening again. A lot of devotees will ask the question, when will I find God? Great question to ask. And some rules of thumb. When all the desires of the world fall away. When the only thing worth knowing is God. And when every thought and every feeling is drenched with the love for God. That's when we'll find God. And so again, just keep at it with your techniques. Reacquaint yourself with whatever it is that's taken you as deep as possible into joy. Find the joy beneath all experiences. Offer that, drenched with love and devotion, back to God. And be a willing channel to send that joy out into the world. Just like Yogananda did when he learned at will to draw cosmic consciousness to himself. He didn't stop there. What can he get? He went on to learn how to transmit it and share it with others. And of course, as devotees, we just need to know that, what is the saying? A saint is a sinner who never gave up. So regardless of where we think we are in that continuum of sinner to saint or God realized, just keep trying. Get up and do it again. Regardless of how badly you failed yesterday, and some of us may have, get up and try again. Because there's only that direction that takes us closer to God. Everything else is immaterial in the search for that inner joy. And so we need to learn how to be more aware that joy is the instant guidance. Now, I remember seeing a cartoon a long time ago. And, when we're trying to see the idea of following the inner joy, following the bliss. But this cartoon, there was a character, and he was a little bit downtrodden, a little bit down on his luck. And, they showed him with, holes in his shoes and the belt on his pants, notched to the farthest one, meaning that he hadn't eaten in a while and, maybe was a hungry man walking the mean streets of the city. And as he's walking out from the other, how on cartoons they have the little boxes. So there's the first image, and then there's the second image and the third image. Well, coming out from the next image is this fragrance. At least that's what it's intended to be, is this tantalizing fragrance, some wonderful aroma of some delicious food. And it hits the nose of this gentleman, and he draws it into himself. And he fills himself with that delightful aroma, so much so that his feet come off the ground. And in the next image, he's literally being transported by this miraculous, wonderful fragrance of food, this delicious aroma. Well, as devotees, we may not be quite so interested in the food per se, but we certainly want to be uplifted like that with the joy of God. So when you feel within yourself the joy of God, allow it to fill you completely, and then allow it to transport you closer and closer to God, closer and closer. Attunement awakens us to the deepest reality and allows us to receive the power of God. By longer, thirsty, guru-given meditation comes the celestial samadhi. We simply have to work with that. Now I'm going to do, if you will indulge me, a little visualization, because we've read about the wonderful experience of divine light and the creation of the universe and the coalescence of divine light into the firmament of this world and then disappears again. And it's a beautiful little reminder that we are more than just the body. We are the soul. We are ever new joy. So if you will, please close your eyes and gaze up into the spiritual eye and gaze into the light at that point. Don't worry, if you don't see light, visualize light there and hold your consciousness there. And visualizing that light as a presence of God within you. And that light is residing at the very center of your heart, shining with purity. Mentally expand the light until it fills your body. Then visualize it expanding beyond the body, surrounding you with a golden aura. That aura, not your physical form, is your true body. Go on expanding the light. Visualize it filling the room in which you sit, the countryside, your neighborhood, your nation, all the continents and oceans of the earth. From the center of your expanded awareness in your own heart, send rays of pure light and love in blessing to all beings everywhere. Release your light finally from its earthly confines. See it streaming outward in bliss to embrace the solar system, the Milky Way, the universe. Send those rays of light from the center of your own being out into the cosmos with God's blessing. Send that ray of light and that experience of joy. Share your joy, divine joy, with everyone. It's not an easy thing to experience divine consciousness. But it is relatively easy to experience some aspect of the divine, even a small taste of it. So don't bemoan your own experience if it doesn't hold up to the experience that Yogananda describes. Instead, work with it as you receive and share it with others. One of the things that's interesting is that A child is busy with play. A youth is busy with sex. Old age is busy with worries. But few seek the salvation of the Spirit. And how true this is. And we find ourselves caught up again and again in the outer aspects of the world. Instead of renouncing the desires of this world, we get caught up in them and drawn outward again. So it takes resolution to say, nope, coming back again, coming back to God. I'm going to go in again, and I'm going to meditate more deeply than before. But we have to keep reminding ourselves that God is more tempting than temptation. And I had an interesting experience this morning as I was meditating. And because I was at that stage in my meditation where I was attempting to be the devotee representing all devotees. In other words, it wasn't my meditation or my experience, but an experience for all devotees. And as I was meditating, I asked the question, when will I find God? And again, not me personally, but when will I, devotees everywhere, find God? And when I asked that inward question, interestingly enough, there came this beautiful chime. Just one note, just a chime. And it resonated within my soul. And it was beautiful, and it was hypnotic, and it was interesting. And I wanted to go follow that chime. And then I remembered, it's like, well, where'd that chime come from? Well, the chime, as it turns out, came from my cell phone. You know how cell phones make all sorts of funny, interesting notes. Well, this chime came from my cell phone. And when I opened my eyes and I noticed that it was across the room recharging, I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm confused again. Let's go back to divine. Let's go back to God is more tempting than temptation. And Lord knows cell phones with their various things they could do for us are very tempting. But nonetheless, I went back to my meditation. And I tried to, again, ask the question, when will I find God? On behalf of all of us who are seeking God. And I closed my meditation, and after a while, after the meditation, and after I'd showered, I still felt the resonance of that chime. Still felt a deep resonance. And I thought, what is that about? So I go to my cell phone, and I open it up, and there's an email message. And the way it works on my phone is just like it was the first line of an email message. Now remember, the question I had asked is, when will I find God? And the answer comes back, and it happens, it is suddenly here. And in the context of that, I realized that it was God. And suddenly God appears. And there's this beautiful chime reminding and sending the message that God is always here. And I share this because every devotee needs to remember that God is always here. And when we put out through love and devotion, God responds. God responds to us in very, very strange ways, including little chimes on the cell phone, if that is your intuitive perception of the divine. So when you ask yourself, when will I find God? Well, remember, when you've let go of all worldly desires, when you know that God is the only thing worth knowing, and when every thought and feeling is drenched in the love for God. Many blessings.